When I first took the job as the driver for the Millionaire's family, I had no idea why so many before me had quit. The mansion looked grand, the cars were luxurious, and the paycheck was something most men would envy. I thought I had struck gold. But the moment I met the family, I began to understand why every driver before me had walked away. Mr. Johnson, the millionaire, was rarely home, buried under his empire of businesses. His wife, Clara, carried herself with an air of superiority that made anyone feel small. Their teenage children, Alex and Sophie, were spoiled beyond measure, treating staff like disposable objects. On my first day, Alex threw his soda can at me just to see if I'd catch it. Sophie, only 16, snapped her fingers to summon me as if I were some kind of servant at her beck and call. The staff whispered stories to me, about drivers who had lasted only days, some even hours, before walking out in frustration. The family's disrespect wasn't hidden. It was deliberate, as though they wanted to test the limits of those who worked for them. I almost questioned my decision but reminded myself why I was there. I had a mother's medical bills to pay and siblings' education to support. Walking away wasn't an option for me. One evening, while driving Clara to a gala, she criticized my every turn, from the way I held the wheel to the routes I chose. My pride burned, but I kept silent. Later that night, Alex drunkenly demanded I pick him up at midnight. When I arrived, he threw up in the back seat and then blamed me for not having the right kind of bags ready. It would have been enough to make any man quit, but I endured. The breakthrough came on a rainy night. Sophie had insisted on sneaking out to a party, and when I drove her back, the car skidded dangerously on the wet road. I managed to regain control, narrowly avoiding a crash. She was shaken, her arrogant mask cracking as she whispered a trembling "thank you." For the first time, she looked at me not as a servant but as someone who had just saved her life. After that night, Sophie's attitude softened. She no longer barked orders but asked politely. Sometimes she even sat in the front seat and talked. Alex noticed the change and, though slower to come around, began showing a little respect too. He still acted entitled, but he didn't throw cans anymore. Clara remained difficult, but I saw the cracks in her coldness when she once asked if I had family depending on me. It was the first personal question she had ever asked. Mr. Johnson was the hardest to read. He barely spoke to me, always rushing between meetings and flights. But one day, when I drove him to a business conference, he suddenly asked, "Why haven't you quit like the others?" I told him the truth, that I needed the job, but also that I refused to let disrespect define me. He nodded silently, and for the first time I sensed a glimmer of admiration in his eyes. Months passed, and slowly the household began to change. I noticed fewer shouting matches, less arrogance in the air. My consistency, patience, and professionalism had done what no other driver's temper or pride could achieve. I had earned their trust. The staff even whispered that the family was different since I had stayed. The real test came when Clara's car broke down during a storm. I was already off duty, but when I heard she was stranded, I rushed to find her. Soaked to the bone, I got the car working and drove her home safely. That night, she looked at me with genuine gratitude and admitted, "Maybe we needed someone like you to remind us how to treat people." From then on, things changed drastically. The Johnsons began to treat their staff with respect. They weren't perfect, but the sharp edges softened. Alex even applied for a volunteer program abroad, and Sophie started driving lessons, though she insisted I be her instructor. Clara made a point to greet me politely every morning, and Mr. Johnson began trusting me with not just his car but his family's safety in every sense. I had gone into that mansion thinking I was just another employee who might not last a week. Instead, I became the one who stayed. The Millionaire's family, who had driven away every driver before me, found in me someone who didn't just serve them but stood firm enough to change them. Looking back, I realized it wasn't just about me proving them wrong, it was about teaching them what respect truly meant. And in turn, they reminded me that even the coldest hearts can warm when shown patience and integrity. I never saw myself as special, just a man trying to provide for his family. But somehow I became the driver who lasted where no one else did, and in doing so I became more than just their driver. I became the reason they learned to see people differently.